right. So, well, we'll go ahead and get started because it's just about 11 o'clock and we have almost 100 people here already. All right. So welcome everybody to the Nightlight Fall Speaker Series. 2020 has been a total roller coaster ride. So it's nice to have a little escape and to study things like astrology and to contemplate, the larger movements of the heavens and the role of the planets in all of the things that are happening. I've certainly found that it's comforting to do so. This speaker series started 10 years ago. I've been having speakers come and give talks on astrology and different topics in astrology for quite some time. The purpose of the series is to do two things: to support accessible, public astrology education, and to also support my fellow colleagues and other teachers who inspire me, or that I, have learned something from, or that I stand to learn something from. And so it's been a kind of a karma yoga. This is not something that I make any money doing. In fact, due to the success of my annual Kickstarter this year, this series it was donation based and all the donations went to the speakers. Now it is entirely free, and we have an honorarium that we pay all of our speakers, which is a really good one as far as the kind of industry standard for speakers goes. So that all happened because of all of you guys who support my work each year. So the Fall Speaker Series began last week. We started with a talk from Matthew Kinney on the Lords of the Four Winds, the Trigon Lords, and their application in a natal chart. No surprise, Matthew's been deeply inspired by Robert Schmidt, so have I, and in his work. And today our speaker also is literally presenting one of the conceptual models of the Hermetic Lots that was inspired by Robert Schmidt. We'll be talking about that in a minute. There are usually 3 speakers per season, and those speakers, you can always find them on the Nightlight Astrology website under the events page. You can sign up and register for free, and then if you can't make it live, you can always get the replay link, which is available for a week afterwards. After that, the rights of the talks go back to our speakers unless you're one of my private students in a class that I teach, in which case you get to, keep a copy of it. So today, Martien Hermes is here giving a talk on the Hermetic Lots. And I'm going to introduce him in a moment, but I also want to make sure that we say something about our guest next week. The final speaker in our series is Stormy Grace. She'll be with us next Saturday, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern. I'm on Central Time, so it's 11 p.m. Central. And it's free. You have to register on the website, but it's free. You get a replay link for up to a week. She is giving a talk on astrology and social media. And in particular, she's going to be talking about some advice for astrologers who are considering whether or not to try to develop a social media presence. I think this is important because I get this question all the time from students in my program. Should I start a blog? Should I start a YouTube channel? How should I market myself? She has a PhD in business and is really good when it comes to, I think she's a combination of authentic and smart when it comes to marketing yourself. So it's going to be a good talk with her next week. So you can register for that again on my website under the events page. Today, I'm really excited to have Martien Hermes here. He reached out after we did a summer speaker series on the lots and said, "Hey, have you ever heard about Robert Schmidt's, conceptual model of the Hermetic Lots?" And I, was like, "Yeah, I've listened to a lot of Robert Schmidt's lectures. I've got kind of his audio library is my jam in my car most days." And yeah, he has some really interesting things to say. And Martien was saying that he has presentations that he's done on the lots and on some of the ideas that Robert Schmidt had about the lots, and inspired by his model as well. And would I ever be interested in doing that? And I was like, yeah, heck yeah, that would be awesome. And it was just really exciting to also find someone else out there who had spent a lot of time with Schmidt's material and with Hellenistic astrology and was inspired by some of those ideas, because I consider myself to be inspired a lot by Robert Schmidt too. So anyway, a little bit about Martien. Martien's last name really is Hermes. It's his family name. Although he says he's the only astrologer in the family. He started studying astrology in 1983 at the age of 24, and around 1994 subscribed to the translations of Project Hindsight, and his astrology completely changed from then on. This happened for a lot of people, by the way. A lot of like why we have Hellenistic astrology here today is because of all of the kind of generation of people that were so influenced by Project Hindsight. He's written many booklets to accompany his workshops, some 20 in total, mostly on modern astrology. He studied Robert Zoller's course on medieval astrology with Stephen Birchfield, and most lastingly, Robert Schmidt's presentations and translations. He's also written several books on astrology in Dutch, many of which have been translated into other languages. His website is martienhermes.com. It's in Dutch, but English speakers can contact him at info@martienhermes.com. Now, my family background with the Ellen Boss is Dutch. So that's that. My family comes from that part of the world. But the presentation today, we're going to be talking about the Hermetic Lots. So we're really excited for this topic, and really, really thankful for you to be here, Martien, and excited for what you have to share with us today.
Thank you.
So we'll have you try to share your screen now, and then Delia will field questions and answers. If you have questions, you're welcome to, there's a place in the chat box where you can submit questions. And whenever Martien feels like he wants to stop and ask for questions, you can, Martien. And if you want to wait till the end too, that's fine, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned last time we spoke, Martien, that you'd prefer to keep questions until the end, right?
Right, yes, okay. Please.
Because
welcome everybody. Thank you for this nice introduction, Acyuta. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this material here, because I'm very excited by it. And I hope you will be too. And thanks, Delia, for all your support and your kindness. English is not my native language, so I might be struggling here and there with finding the right words and having to pause because I want to express it as explicitly as I can. So I hope it will not interfere with the flow of what I'm presenting here, and I hope you will enjoy it. So, well, to start off, it's actually Hermetic astrology has a lot to do with fate concepts. And the question is, of course, let me see if it works. It's not, yeah, there it is. So the question in Hermetic astrology actually is, what is fate? And fate has several meanings, but the interesting thing is that Robert Schmidt discovered that the fate concepts were very deeply interwoven into the ancient astrology and the astrology of the Greek astrologers, the Hellenistic astrologers. So let me first try to give you sort of an understanding of what fate is in my own words, and I hope you can relate to that. So, but it's very important because what I'm trying to present here is that fate is a very important concept to understand the Hellenistic lots and also the 7 Hermetic lots. But that will eventually show in my presentation here. So let's have a look at what fate is. And actually you can say that fate is that what makes an individual. Some of you who know Plato's philosophy will hear some Platonic overtones in what I'm presenting now, because you can say that you can speak about the essential man, a woman of course as well, and the individual man. And you can say that the essential man is man in theory, and the individual man is the man in reality. And the difference is that the essentiality of us as human beings is that we all have the same principle makeup. And in astrology, it is a fact that we all have the same factors in our natal chart. So you have 12 signs of the zodiac, you have 7 traditional planets, and perhaps 10 when you use the modern planets, and perhaps even more when you use all sorts of modern astrological stuff in your chart. We all in that sense, we are all the same. But what makes us an individual is that what has to do with fate. So you can say that the individual human being is shaped by his or her life, and that happens by events, by fate. If you simply take the fact, the difference between man or woman, if you're born a woman or if you are born a man, that makes a very big difference in the expectations of what you can expect in your life. Because I, as a man, cannot give birth to children, and giving birth to children is a very important factor in your personality and in your life. So that's a difference. Nowadays in the political scene, as Black Lives Matter is a very important thing going on at the moment, that also gives very different expectations for what your future can be, or the possibilities that you have, how they come to fruition. So that's a big difference. So you could say that we have a promise, an ideal, we have a potentiality, and we have a reality, and that's the difference. So man in theory is fine, we all have the same makeup, but fate has a lot to do with what we are and what we become in life and what we can become. It's not just simply that you can be anything that you'd like. So man in theory is actually sort of the American dream in astrology. You can be anything you want to, but the reality is that that's not true. It's not completely true. Of course, you have to put yourself to tasks, but it will not mean that you will always succeed however hard you try. And that's sort of the American dream. So you can say that you can compare this with an acorn or a chestnut. That's a seedling. So this seed is can only become what it's supposed to become. It can either be an acorn or a chestnut, but the way in which this seedling, the potential of this seed can come to fruition has much to do with what its fate. Because when the chestnut falls on unfertile soil, it cannot take root. Or when there is very little water there, it falls on rocky ground and it cannot shoot roots. That means that the possibility, the promise that this seedling shows cannot come to full fruition. And that has to do with everything that befalls this seedling. So whether this chestnut will grow into a magnificent tree, as we often see, there are also other seedlings which grow much less grand and lesser, and perhaps not even come to fruition because the seedling is eaten by an animal, or a child picks it up and uses it for a project at school. We don't know. So the promise is there, but the essential outcome has a lot to do with events by fate. So that's interesting. So it's the difference between potentiality and reality. So the potential is equal for all of us, but our reality, the things that surround us and the fate that we meet, is something that has to do with other factors of having to do with other factors in the chart. So to me, that is actually the difference between astrology and horoscopy. Astrology is actually the theory behind our science. Everything we can say about all the factors in a natal chart and the theory behind it, but horoscopy has a lot to do with how this potential comes to fruition in real life. So horoscopy has also to do with how the potential factors in your chart are actually fated by the way they are placed in the chart. So that is what fate is. And the word psyche has a lot to do with the Greek notion of what befalls something. So what befalls the seedling. So that has to do with what makes an individual. So you can say that this is what fate actually is, my rendition of the fate concept. And the things that befall you, that is what shapes you, your life and my life and everybody's life, is actually what makes us unique. So, and there's a very funny comedian in America, Stephen Wright, who always says, Always remember you're unique, just like everyone else. Well, that's true, and it's a bit of a funny take on the principle of uniqueness, but here is the uniqueness of the individual as shaped by fate. Okay, so when we recapitulate this, you can say that astrologically, fate, it can be seen in four principles, four things, which is the principles as such. You can say that this is the theory of astrology, the principles, zodiac, planets, houses, etc. But these are placed in a context, and that's your natal chart. So that natal chart has a lot to do with what is your potential and how this potential is placed in reality. So how fate will interact with your basic makeup. So, and then after it's being placed in a context, you as a person with all this baggage, with all this potentiality, you are placed in the world, and the world also has is a factor of very great importance in what you can achieve in your life. So it's not just merely the natal promise, but it's also what the world has to offer for you, and it's also something that can help or either obstruct your potentiality, and that has to do with factors in the world. And also time, which is a specific forte of astrology, is able to share with us which times are most propitious for you to undertake stuff and to do things, because not everything started at a certain moment, as we all know, is perhaps not the most opportune moment to start something. I believe the Greek word for that is kairos. I'm not quite sure, but I believe that has to do with the right time to start something. So there is also a principle having to do with fate. Okay, so this is my rendition of what fate is in astrology. And again, people who are a bit familiar with Platonic philosophy will understand these principles, as they are quite deeply found in Plato's philosophy. And this is also something that was Schmidt's take on this astrology, that it had quite deep Platonic roots. So let me explain this later on. Okay, so traditional astrology has to do with fate. And the fate concepts in Hellenistic astrology are a great context for understanding this Greek Hellenistic astrology. Okay. So now this is what I want to present to you in the next hour or 1.5 hours. Something about Robert Schmidt, the way he worked. So how did he find all this stuff? What was his manner of approach of the ancient astrology? Then I will present the model, astrology as a Platonic-Hermetic practice. That's the model. And then number 3 and 4 on the lots in general and the Hermetic lots. I understand, and please appreciate that this is quite heavy material astrologically, in the sense that it is quite philosophical, but it's what I usually do with these sort of presentations is that I make pictures of the slides that come into view. So I would suggest that you do the same, because there's a lot of material that I will show you. And when you make a picture of each slide, you will see how I got to the principles and how they work in this model. So please do that, and I hope you will have great joy in studying this material, as did I, and Acyuta as well, as he said. Okay, now let's talk about the rediscovery of Greek Hellenistic astrology, because Project Hindsight was a major player in this rediscovery, simply because before this period, the Greek astrology was hardly studied, at least in the Anglo-Saxon world. I'm not quite familiar how it was studied in Europe, but it's at least the serious study of this Greek Hellenistic astrology started with Project Hindsight, and that was around 1993, 1994. So let's have a look. And of course, I, as a student of Mr. Schmidt, have to honor him because he was the one who really put this on the agenda in the Western astrological tradition, the connection with one of the most early sources of this astrology. So, unfortunately, he passed away 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, which is really sad because, well, he had a lot of projects going on and he could not finish them, sadly. So, but Mr. Schmidt came on the scene and, well, what he did was really as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit, to quote one of my favorite comedians, Billy Connolly. And the reason was that the astrology, make it personal, the astrology that I was taught was used certain principles and certain factors that were actually not quite as I was taught them. So the Hellenistic astrology turned out to be quite a rich source to get acquainted with the astrological principles that we still use today, but the ones of which we lost sight of their earliest developments. So also some things were introduced in modern astrology, as I was taught in modern astrology, that weren't quite right or never quite fully understood. Why did they do this? Why was this such a big deal for this ancient astrology? So it was really a sort of an eye-opener. And well, it also was a bit of a disappointment for some astrologers, because there are many traditions in our astrology, in the sense that many people use astrology for very different purposes, and they often change the way in which these principles were introduced and how they should be used. But the question of how something should be used is always a bit of a difficult thing to get across. So Mr. Schmidt often met what he called a shitstorm, because he introduced things that really put some visions on how things work in astrology on a different level, and that was not always quite as welcome. So, well, be that as it may, his work really had a big impression on many astrologers nowadays, and it did, and also had a big impression on me. So, as you will hear in this presentation. So, one of his most important works, all of his work is important. Let me state that before I go into definitions and foundations, the booklet was very important, because in the Greek text, it was a fact that many of the astrological technical language was never defined. So that meant that most astrologers were actually using certain factors in a chart, but they did not say or did not explain what was meant by it. And these definitions did. And the interesting thing is that the translations of these almost 30 aphorisms took him 5 years to complete, which is really strange, because he was very proficient in ancient Greek. So he once said in the talking tour that accompanied this book, he said, well, if I had translated it simply like that, it would have taken me perhaps 3 to 4 or 5 months, and then it would be finished. But it took him 5 years to do that. So he had many, many insights trying to get a grip on what these definitions actually meant. And with that, he really laid the foundations for this traditional astrology, what we now call Hellenistic Greek astrology. So this is a very important book, and how they say this is a Maya opus, that is a Dutch word, but this is perhaps his most important book. Now, after the year 2000, he said he stopped doing translations because his insight led him to believe that it was quite difficult to keep revising his translations, because he got ever more knowledge of what was actually meant by a lot of these definitions, or this technical jargon. So But luckily he started doing webinars again, sorry, not webinars, workshops. And in the end, he also started his basic course in Hellenistic Natal Astrology. And you can understand that I was very happy with my last name because he called it the System of Hermes. Ah, yay, that's me. Okay, so. Okay, so this was Mr. Robert Schmidt, and let's honor him before the fantastic work that he did. Let me also tell you something about the way he worked. And why is that important? Because nowadays, when you get acquainted with astrology, often people don't realize that we have really a legacy of Latin and Arabic astrological jargon with layers of translation between them. And people who have done translations, as I have, you always know that translating is sort of a treason. That's a saying in Dutch. You commit treason to the author because you use words only in a certain respect, because they can have many layers of meaning, and you lose that these layers because you translate it in another language. And also, one of the things is that a lot of these words, aspects, signs, the transliterations, Al-Kokeden, Al-Muten, Hilech, Verdaria, etc., actually have no meaning for simple people anywhere. So if you go onto the street and you ask a person, do you know what an aspect is? The person will probably say, no, I've got no idea. But when you ask a person, do you know what a witness is, what witnessing is, which is the literal translation of the word, the Greek word used for aspects, marturia, is a testament, is a testimony. So that's very important to understand that these words have lost some of their lore simply because they are really strange jargon, strange technical language. So, and Schmidt always said, well, the Greek astrologers are in the enviable position to create or design or conceive the astrological technical language from scratch. They did not have to rely on translations. And why do we say that? Because they used very little of the astrological traditions that went before the Greek period. They used some of it, but they reinterpreted. So they designed their own language. They gave the words to certain astrological principles simply because they invented the words for it. And Schmidt found out that these words were multivalent and they were also cryptic. Again, that's why it took him 5 years to translate and understand 30 aphorisms defining astrological technical language. So you can understand that this really was quite some difficult work for him. And as he said, they chose these words, this technical language, deliberately. So when somebody says the heaven speaks, I always say, but in which dialect do the heavens speak? So that's important. So what did Schmidt do with the Greek language as a tool? So he used the Greek language as a clue. And you could speak about the violent etymology of Robert Schmidt. He used that word violent etymology because he studied a German philosopher called Heidegger, who was reproached for the violence of his etymology. And Acyuta used a very interesting term for the word etymology, the anatomy of words, and that's quite a very good description of what etymology is. And Robert Schmidt was really good at it because since he said himself, since he was, I believe, 18 years old, he read ancient Greek on a daily basis. So that was his, how he was taught to use this language. So he used a lot of it. So what was his approach? The principle that he always promoted was that he would try to understand the text on the basis of the language and the principles that were used by these writers and not how we now think about these subjects. And you could call this the etymological approach. And that's interesting because, and that it's really something that he did, and at least for me, as the Stoics said, they said that etymology is the key that unlocks reality. And Schmidt, in my view, was a person who really unlocked a lot of the reality of Greek astrology. And it's really often mind-blowing what he did with it, and it's very inspiring. It really set my soul alight to speak in those terms. So in this way, Schmidt unlocked a very deep level of understanding the conceptual background of Western astrology, which he always said, astrology is a rational construct, and that I will explain this further on. So that's what he did. So as he said, we must indeed make every effort to first understand the texts on their own terms and out of their own presuppositions, and not impose our own modern thinking on them. And that's what it is. He took everything they wrote seriously. He did not think that these were persons who could not write really good Greek in the way they did, but he tried to understand why did they write it like this, and what can we conclude when we try to understand these texts in the way they wrote them. So that's what he did. That was the violent etymology. I'm sorry, I cannot give very much examples of how this etymology worked with him, but I have a few. So another very famous traditional astrologer who was really also involved with Project Hindsight in the beginning was Robert Zoller. And he also said that something very important, we can be digging up the writings of the ancient Greeks, which is happening now, and that's to be applauded. There are many translations projects going on at the moment, and they are really helping us to understand what are they doing, how do you use the principles of this astrology, and how can you use them to delineate charts. But he also said we must ultimately see the world as the ancients did if we are to understand their metaphysics. And that's exactly what Robert Schmidt also did in his study of the ancient texts. He tried to understand why do they see the world as they did. And one of the important things in that is the fate concepts. So let's have a look. So you could say that the etymological approach, the grammatical paradigm, unlocked many cross-references with other fields of knowledge. And that was really one of his discoveries, that the astrological terminology was used, the exact same words in other fields, one-on-one. So this way he found, for example, the legal paradigm. The legal paradigm, when you, what we call aspects, were described as witnessing, marturia. And marturia has the word martyr in it. And a martyr is somebody who witnesses for a certain view in a very special way by giving his life for it. So a planet witnessing another planet is much more telling than saying this planet aspects the other one, because that's quite meaningless. When you say planet A is a witness of planet B, that certainly gives another slant on what is meant by what we now call an aspect. When you talk about a retrograde planet, the word anapodizo, which is the Greek word for it, is recalling a witness for cross-examination. And that's interesting. Why? Because that actually says that when a planet is retrograde, it is not completely trustworthy. So, and that's what happens in court. A witness that has perhaps not told a complete truth is recalled for cross-examination because what he said was either not true or needed to be further examined. So that's judicial astrology, right? So, and judicial astrology is a very interesting way to learn to see how astrological factors work in a chart. You can use the legal paradigm very good for delineations of a chart. He also found the nautical metaphor, the astrological term, for instance, for falling amiss, which is a planet that is not functioning quite well, is the word ekpetosis, which means shipwreck. Well, that's pretty straightforward, right? Now, these fate concepts, the alchemical overtones, the magical, ritualistic overtones, were all discovered by Schmidt by using his skill to etymologically analyze the Greek language and the Greek words used by these astrologers for their astrology, for their horoscopy. So that was very interesting. So, and this is what he concluded or said, this is what he really did. So my approach is to examine the tradition, etc., etc. So, and also follow these concepts and how they were used from one language to another, and also from one astrological tradition to another, up until modern times. So that's quite important, and that's actually the hallmark of his work, and he really did that. So he must be applauded for spending that much time using his skills to get into the heart of this astrology. So thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I'm standing on your shoulders. When people like this, this has to do with what you did. Okay. Now we have to come to the conceptual model as inspired by Mr. Schmidt. And this is actually the thing about the model that is behind it, because Robert Schmidt, when it was the year 2000, he stopped translating text because he saw that there was a very large, broad vision behind and system, as he called it, behind this Hellenistic astrology. So he was trying to figure out what is this system and why is everything so intertwined with each other, which is also a fate word, things intertwined with each other. So this is what he did. So let me try to explain this model again in a very simple way, because that's how I need to see it so I can actually talk about it. So let me do this. So here we have actually the introduction of Plato into astrology, because Plato was talking about the upward and the downward path. And that's actually the model behind all of this. And this will come in my presentation again and again. It's about the downward path and the upward path. So let me explain how this is formulated. So, in my view, suppose this is actually Platonic thinking, what I'm sharing now, but in a very simplistic way, perhaps. Now, suppose you have an idea, I'm going to build a bike. That doesn't mean that you, by simply having the idea, the bike is suddenly there. No, you have to work on it. You have to work with the idea, work with it, work on it, etc., to eventually be able to produce the bike that you thought about in your head. So that was your inspiration. I'm going to build a bike, etc. So you can see sort of three layers in this process. You have got to have an idea. And that's what I show you in this stairwell going up and going down. You can go the stair upwards and you can go the stairs downward. And that's the principle behind a lot of this, this esoteric teaching, as it were. Because this esoteric teaching is, can be found in almost any esoteric school or whatever you're reading, which is called esoteric, because this is the background information about it. I must also say that a lot of this Platonic material is really still alive in a lot of things in our world today. And I often jokingly say that Christendom is actually sort of a Plato for the masses. And I do not mean that in a derogatory way, but it's simply something that is very deep into Christian thinking. It's also Neoplatonic thinking, but that doesn't matter. It's also has its roots in Platonic thinking. And I also say jokingly that Jung is Plato for astrologers nowadays. But okay, so you cannot see, but the thing in the upper right-hand corner is the idea, and the material comes from the third level. So you got to have a plan, and and the material has a mind of its own. It has its own dynamics, and it resists. Simply by having the idea, I want to do this, doesn't mean that you simply the bike appears out of nowhere. You have to work on material, and the material resists, and that's actually also a fate concept. So let's look at one of the more ancient sources which also reflects this model, the Corpus Hermeticum, thanks to my great-great-great-grandfather, Mr. Hermes. And it looks a bit like this. So incarnation is said in that specific writing in I think almost all esoteric schools, is that incarnation, the soul comes from way up on high, beyond the spheres as it were, from the heavens through the planetary spheres, and it comes down to earth. And in each sphere the soul receives the qualities of the planet, sort of as a garment. It puts on a coat, and the coat has the characteristics of this, the planet of that sphere. So you put on 7 coats. So this is the model, and what happens is that the path downward, because that's what it is materialization, embodiment. The soul is embodied with these several layers of planetary stuff, virtues are they called, and it's also an individualization. So this means that when you are born, then you have a chart, and there on earth it's colored, it manifests, and it is experienced. And then from then up, you live your life, and then perhaps you can, that what is your chart will come to life, as it were. That's perhaps the reason why I use this pretty colored picture, because it becomes real, it manifests, and it is experienced. So this path downward, that is what differentiation is. It differentiates into something individual, it is a materialization, it is an embodiment. And this is what individualization actually is. So what happens when a soul leaves the body? And it's also found in the Hermetic and the esoteric writings. The soul from the earth leaves the body and goes up through the planetary spheres, and in every sphere the characteristics of the planets are removed. So that's the upward path, and that's towards the immaterial, so it's towards the source, and you could also call it spiritualization. So this is unification. That's a very important principle. So here again you see some Platonic thinking used in a Hermetic context, and this is a very interesting view on this upward and downward path. So when we come to Plato, this upper sphere, that which is above everything else, he called the eternal being, Ide, which sprouts the idea of ideas, right? And the lower form here on earth is the temporal, the becoming. So being and becoming, that are two principal things of Platonic philosophy. Now the downward path, the differentiation has to do with this. Things become less and less general, more and more unique, more individual, more specific, more complex, more concrete, and more transient. And the upward path, I hope you can see it, it's increasingly universal and abstract. It's not specific, it's not individual, it is the essence. You become one with the eternal, you become one. And on the other hand, when you're here on earth, you become not one, but you're one of many. So that's the principle behind this. So again, I show you this because Plato did this on a grand scale. So you have in the Timaeus, one of the writings of Plato, you see that on the first level there's God, light, the universe, and the second emanation is called the cosmos, and the third one is the earth. And you could also say, well, we have a source, and we have sort of the mechanics, and we have an operating field. And this is what I actually showed with one of my previous slides. You have principles, and they are put in a context, and that context is put in the world. So, and the context is we are put in the world, and we use the chart, our natal chart, to find out about the mechanics at work in us, but we have to work in the world here on earth, the operating field. So the study of this material plane is called physics, and the other one, the above all of this, is metaphysics. Well, I think you know that all. Everyone knows that. Okay. Now let me tell you something about how this model, this downward path, can be seen in astrological factors. It is I call it the fatedness of the astrological principles, because they get ever more entwined and ever more put in a context. So let me start with this. At the first level, we have the zodiac, the 12 images of the zodiac. Okay, but when we go one step downward, the images, the zodiac signs, become the topical places in whole sign houses. So place 1, 2, 3, and 12 is the last one. So what happens here is that the universal principles of the zodiac images are now put in a context. You cannot see this, but it's the fate of the images is that they have become the 12 topical places. Now, let me give you an example. My rising image is the crab, which means that the universal principle of the crab now is determined toward a specific theme in my chart, which has to do with the first house. So the crab now has to represent my first sign, the rising image, my ascendant, which has to do with vita corpus ingenium, my life, my vitality, and my inborn spirit. And the role that this zodiac sign now gets is to represent that. So it's no longer free in a certain way to speak of it in that sense. So that's fated. So the crab in my chart is fated to represent my rising image. And in your charts, the crab, when you don't have a crab ascendant, when the crab is not your ascendant, the crab has another responsibility. It has to represent something else. So it becomes entwined in a principle which has to do with being confined to something, which is fatedness. It becomes ever more differentiated towards something more specific. And that also makes it more individual for you, because the crab represents something specific in your chart. And the interesting thing is that on the third level, the images become the 12 fortune houses. And that's, for some of you, this might be quite new material, a new insight, but the 12 fortune houses are also a very important factor in Hellenistic astrology. So now let's look at the other principle.
Sorry, Martien, before you move on to your next slide, I just want to point out that the very bottom of the slide is getting cut off from the viewers. Yeah, okay. So if you could just make sure that if there's anything on the bottom of the slide that you actually read it out so that it'll be on the recording, we'll really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see that the fortune houses is counting images from fortune?
Yes, what's getting cut off is the white box with the text. I can just see the top of the text, fortune, something.
Okay.
That's
Can
where
I
it gets cut off.
make the slide a bit more smaller? I'm not quite sure. Okay. Okay, so thank you for pointing that out. So, okay, back to the planets. On level 1, the astrological principles, the planets are the gods, and the traditional ones, the 7 traditional planets, they are the gods. But when you move one step downward, the planets become the staff of the images, because each planet has a certain specific role for each image. So it's the domicile ruler, the exaltation ruler, the confine or bounds ruler, etc. I hope people are familiar with these things. But that actually means that each planet now is no longer completely free to do as it likes, but it now has a specific task. So it now has a role to play, and it is now confined to being the ruler of the first house or the ruler of the second house, etc. And each of these essential dignities of the planet have a certain responsibility for something of the image, and also as being the ruler of a house. So you can also see that here the planets are no longer completely free. Now they have a task. They have something to do. And the interesting thing is that, so the fate of every planet is that it also is positioned here or there and not somewhere else in your chart. It's under testimony of this or that planet, which is different from my chart, but not another one. So you see that this differentiation is quite an interesting concept, because you can see it at work in the several charts that you are acquainted with or come to see. You see that the planets are no longer completely free. They are the staff, and they have all sorts of possible interaction with other things in your chart, which makes your chart individual and unique as compared to mine or from your neighbor or whoever. So this is interesting because it's a differentiation. It makes it unique, unique to you, unique to somebody else, the chart. Okay, as Valens said it, the planets are the servants of Harmony. And Harmony is one of the fate words. I will talk about that a little further on. So the planets are the servants of Harmony, always also saying they are the servants. They are no longer the ultimate rulers of something. They are the servants of something. So they're put in a context and constraints. Now, I think you can see this. Planets on the third level become the 7 Hermetic Lots, and they also become daimones. And daimons, we have to talk about that because it's very important to try to understand what happens on this third level, as we are, all of us, used to seeing planets as causes. Because whenever you have a domicile ruler of a certain image or the house ruler of a certain house, we use that to see what happens in the said house. So that's important. So what happens on the third level? And the third level needs to be understood as the place where things also happen independently of our own actions and intentions. You are placed in the world and sometimes accidents happen, okay? To put it more bluntly, pardon my French, shit happens, okay? Now, Schmidt was of the opinion that planets on this level become daimons. They are no longer the gods, but they are the power, what we call the virtues of the planets, how they are operative in the world. So you can understand the principle of a daimon is something that in a way has an effect on you and perhaps talks to you. We talk about spirit sitting on your shoulder, the devil and the good one, and the one saying you should do this, that's better, and the other one tries to seduce you to do the opposite or something worse or something bad. So that's what daimons are. They are influences, things talking you, but in a way, or inspiring you, or informing you. You can call it whatever you like, but at this level, they are influences that are working on your soul in a certain way and telling you to do something. So that's what a daimon is. It's a force operative in the world, and the force is informing you or inspiring you, or perhaps even inspiring you to do something which is not as healthy for you as it should be. So that's important. Now I have to read this. Schmidt said that lots are efficient causes acting independently of planetary principles. And that last statement is very important. I will come back to it later when we start talking about how you can use the dispositor, the ruler of a certain Hermetic lot, as a factor not responsible for what happens, but the one who has to deal with it. So what happens is independent of planetary principles, but the planets ruling the Hermetic lot has to manage it. So that's an important insight. I will come back to that later. So he said they are responsible for events happening, in Greek, kata tuchein ex anankes, which means in accordance with fortune, tuche, by means of necessitating or efficient causes. Now, necessitating has to do with something fated. Necessitating means you cannot do anything about it. It happens simply because it happens, necessitating it. When you drive a car into a wall, necessitating things are what happens to your body when you do that. So by necessity, I think you know what I mean, what necessitating means. It is the effect of something done before. When you drive a car into a tree or into a wall, you're going to get hurt. That's a necessary result of the event. So again, he says the things happening at this level are not by means of higher principles. And that's quite an important thing to remember. And I will get back to that later. But that's, so here we have three principles actually following this path downward with respects to astrological principles. So the zodiac changes into topical places and in fortune houses, and the planets at the highest level are the gods, with which we attribute many things, but on one level lower, on the second level in the natal chart, the planets are not that how do you call numinous, but they become staff of images. They have a certain role to play. They have a responsibility for a certain image, sign, and for a certain house. So they are the servants of fate. And on the third level, they are not in a sense at work, but they are the virtues of the planets at work in the physical world. Okay, so that's an important thing. So this is very interesting because I think what I will be showing now is actually proof that these three layers, these three principles, these three levels of activity are quite real in this astrology, because each level has its own model. And the model of the third level actually has to do with the lot of fortune, as I will explain. So let's have a look at these models. They are these. So the Zodiac model, actually, you could say it's about the sun. It's the principle that gives life to many things. And what you see here, the first image is the seasonal circle, which starts at the northern hemisphere with the spring image of the ram, and then goes through the summer image of the crab, the Cancer, and the autumnal image of Libra, the scales, and the midwinter sign of the goat-horned one, which we now know as Capricorn. So you can see that there's a universal principle here at work, which has to do with life. Point. Seasonal things start to grow, and then you have a very high, what you call sort of a maximum influence, and then they start to wither away, and then they die, and then this cycle goes on and on. So that's the principle of the sun and the seasonal image. Now, the Thema Mundi, I'm not sure if everybody can see this, but the Thema Mundi is actually a different chart and starts with the crab rising, which has the moon as its principal significator, the principal planet belonging to the crab. So the Thema Mundi has quite a different chart, and this is what's said in the ancient literature is actually the principle to be used by astrologers for their work. So you can find many traditional principles in this chart. I could do a complete presentation about what's seen with this, and people familiar with Hellenistic astrology have seen this in the work of, for instance, Chris Brennan and perhaps Benjamin Dykes and all the other ones who translate material. But this is a very interesting thing, and you could use this model to describe how and why certain images and houses have the meaning that they have. So that's quite an interesting model. So that model is used for the second layer, the second stair downwards, the path downward, the second stairway on that. And in the third one, you have a new series of houses starting with the image where fortune is. And the interesting thing is, there is no model for this level because it is different for every individual chart. My lot of fortune falls in a different place from everyone born at the same day as I was, but in a different hour. So the fortune is really quite random, and randomness is a sort of a fate concept. You don't have a regular model for this one. This is actually unique for every one of us. So each one has its lot of fortune in a different place. And also there starts the fortune houses. So this is by chance and not random. That's what the text says that now appeared in the slide. Okay, so I think that this is sort of a proof that sort of well, underlying all these three different levels, and you can find them in astrology, in a Hellenistic astrology. That's important. So we have a third level with a life of its own, you could say. Okay, so you could say when we have, again, our Platonic model, in which he said that the cosmic soul can look up and can look down. It's exactly what we do when we use a chart. We look at the archetype by means of the big telescope, and we look at the experienced reality by means of a microscope. So that's what we as astrologers do. So we can look upward and we can look downward. We can look towards the principles that are responsible for everything that happens in your life. And you can also look at the experienced reality, how things work in your life. That's what the third level, the third picture says. Okay, now there are also fate words connected with these three levels. You could say pronoia is a very important word in the Greek philosophy. Pronoia orders all the things that will come and is responsible for the texture of events. And the second one is called hymarmene, is the sowing of the seeds of all things that will come, also called logoi spermatikoi, I believe in Stoic philosophy. And at the third level, I will read this, is ananke, that is that mode of fate where the seed that is sown is coerced to come to fruition. And coercion is exactly that what the word ananke means. It cannot go in any other way than this way. So again, there we have the seedlings, the acorn and the chestnut growing into a certain form. But what form it will eventually become is very important and very dependent on whatever the seedling meets in the world, where it lands and where it's sown or not, right? So katetugen ex anankas, by means of fortune and by coercion. So you cannot see this, but one of the Hermetic definitions is that man has three forms: the spiritual, the soul, and the body. So that's important because that also has to do with Hermetic thinking about these three levels. These are the three forms that we as a human being have. We have things of high principles, we have them at work in our souls, and we have them at work in the world. So to recapitulate, so you have the archetype, you have the individual promise, and you have fortune, specific results. So you could say there are three levels of delineation, and you can find them in the ancient texts that are now translated, because the lots are always used in a lot of considerations, by example, Persian astrologers. And also, there are also two levels of input, because the archetype is placed in a context, your natal chart, the radix, the root, and fortune, the events happening to you, are also a very important factor used for trying to understand your life. And this is an important addition of a level in astrology that perhaps is not often recognized as such. And I hope this presentation will make it obvious that this is a thing that was clearly addressed in the Greek and the Hermetic astrology. So perhaps we could also say that we're talking about universal principles, which are the upper perspective. We have an inner perspective, that is horoscopy, the natal chart, things that work in your soul. And we have an outer perspective, the things that work on your soul, the fortune houses and the lots and the parts. So, okay. Now, in the next slides in my presentation, I will go on about the downward path, because we're going to talk about the lots, but there's also an upward path. And I will not address this here explicitly, but it's also quite interesting to think about that, because if there is a downward path and you can understand the principles of this differentiation, and I hope that you see that this is a very real and very interesting concept in this astrology, you can also think about, well, what does it mean, the upward path? What is representative in a chart, perhaps, of what is the upward path? Where do you end up when you go the path upward? Now, one thing that you don't see is number one, and that word is deification. So when you go from 1 to 3, you have differentiation, but when you go from 3 to 2, you could say that this perhaps is personification. And number one, which you cannot read, I think, is deification. So that's interesting, because that is a very interesting way of thinking about this. And this is actually why I honor Mr. Schmidt, because he really brings this into focus, but also does it with astrological factors.
Martien, just so you know, we can actually see the text that says deification and everything.
Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, I was mistaken earlier. The screen is showing completely. It's not getting cut off at the bottom. That was a problem with my configuration.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. So you could also say, and this, I think people who are involved with esoteric teachings or practices, the differentiation has to do with multitude. And in the second level, in our own soul, we're talking about separateness and dividedness. And on the first level, we're talking about unity. So whoever one of you is involved in mindfulness or whatever, or as Acyuta is very heavily involved in yoga, bhakti yoga, it's always about going from the multitude and the confusion of that and trying to reach some form of unity, at peace with yourself. So you could say that this is the stairway to heaven. And that's interesting, because the stairway to heaven was a very big theme in medieval times in our culture, as you can see in this picture. The angels on the side of this picture climbing the stairs upwards to, well, the unity, number one. And in the drawing that you see is a medieval drawing. You see Christ sitting on his throne and people trying to climb from the sphere of the earth through the the spheres of all the planets. And you see one is drawn up by his hair, and one is clinging on to somebody else, and somebody's using. They all want to get there, so that's the point of the unity. That's interesting. Okay, so that's the upward path, trying to strive to unity, deification. Okay, now we are getting into the essence a bit of what this talk is actually about. It's about the lots and the parts. And my question, what on earth are they, is also sort of a pun, because that's actually what they are. They represent things on earth. And Robert Schmidt said a lot part is the differentiation of the many different possible meanings of a planet into one specific topic at work in the world around us. A differentiation, remember that word, because I will show how this is represented in the astrology. So this is what Schmidt said. A lot part is a differentiation of the many different possible meanings of a planet into one specific topic. Let me show you what he means. The topics of a planet, and that's interesting, represent everything that a planet signifies. So a lot part represents only one thing. So there's a lot of the mother, a lot of the father, a lot of children, many, many lots. But when you think about a planet actually encompasses everything that is associated with that planet. So you could say that a planet actually has too much meanings. It represents everything of its core principles. So Venus rules all love, all relationships, all sorts of desires. And it's actually a fact that we can desire a lot of things. We can have a very warm relationship with people, with objects, with feelings, with food, you name it, and we can love it. But it would be astrologically very difficult to differentiate between these topics, all belonging to Venus. So you can never make Venus responsible for all these several things having to do with the warm, desirous feelings for people, objects, feelings, etc. And this is where the lots and the parts come in. Because what you see is that Venus is part of a lot of lots, a lot of parts. And what you can see here is that the path downward is also a descent, a concretization, because a theos, that's a planet, here it's Venus, becomes a very specific topic. So it's a differentiation. So the ascendant plus the moon minus Venus is representative of the mother. And you can have children, you can have adultery, children, girls, male children, the marriage of men, craftsmen, male friends of a man, female friends of a woman, etc., etc. And these are all very specific topics, all can be associated with the planet Venus. So of the multiple possible meanings of the planet now become one specific well-defined force, which is a daimon working for one topic alone. It informs you about something going on here in the world. Now, this is actually quite brilliant. Suppose you have two children, a boy and a girl, and with one of them you have a very good relationship, and with the other one you have a bad relationship because it's difficult, struggling, etc. I think we can all relate to that. How it's very difficult to associate that with one of the houses having to do with children, mostly the fifth house. But here you have a lot that has to do with boys and girls. And because the lot falls in a different place, as the lot of the girl falls in image A, and a lot of the boy falls in image E, under ruled by, on the disposition of another planet. So which one of these two planets is the better one? And that probably indicates that your relationship with that child is much more simple, or better, or warmer than with the other one, perhaps disposed by one of the malefics, or perhaps Mars or Saturn. So here you have a means of dissociating all the several topics belonging to Venus and now differentiate them into one specific theme. That's interesting. Okay, I think this is really brilliant. There were really big brains working on these topics. So to come up with this idea is really mind-blowing to me. So what's also very important is where the lot falls in all sign houses is often called the place of that person or of that specific topic. And Firmicus calls it the house of, etc., of the father, the mother, the siblings. Here's an example. If you wish to discover the house of the mother, use this formula, and wherever the sign, the last degree falls, that's the house of the mother. And that's interesting. Why? Because this suggests that we have a new topical place for something that's already in the natal chart, because the children or your brothers or sisters, your siblings, are indicated by the third place. And now you get a lot of siblings, perhaps, and it can fall in any one of the 12 houses. And that's quite random. It's very different. So the regularity of the normal division of the houses 1 to 12 becomes scrambled at this level, which is also, again, a view of the Earth is seen as a place where things come to be and pass away. And it's all very chaotic. And this chaos is actually suggested by the fact that all these lots, there are many of them, because there are so many things in this world, but they fall in different houses and they lose the regularity of these houses. And this again, to me, suggests that the third level has its own reality. I see that again as sort of a proof that this third level really has a very important thing in this Greek thinking about natal charts. So that's important. Okay, so to recapitulate, we have the principles. So say the Son, the Father as principle, the Father-like, perhaps. On the second level, the second path downward, working in the soul. The principle is working in the soul. You could say, so the Sun in your chart represents the Father, the principle of fatherhood in your soul. And then as fact in the world, you have also a lot of the Father with these mathematical formula. So this is the principle. This is the model that underlies Hellenistic astrology and has something to do with the place of the lots in this astrology, the several lots. And as Plato said, the cosmic soul can look up and it can look down. When it looks up, it looks at the principles. When it looks down, it looks at the earth, the specific things. So now I come to the core of what I wanted to present. So here we are talking about the Hermetic Lots. Now, the interesting thing about these lots is that they are not a combination of several planets, like with the other lots, but they are always calculated in relation to the Sun and the Moon, the rulers of one's all, but they are the archetypal lights, the ruler of one's all, and the calculations are done by means of the two archetypal lots, which are fortune and daimon. So the rulers of one's all, I found this really, really fantastic picture about this principle, because here you see a medieval drawing of Jesus or God as the eternal principle, that which always is and will always be, which is actually Plato's idea of the idea, the ideas, which are always young and vibrant and alive. And this eternal person, Jesus or God, is dancing with the temporal being, represented here by the skeleton and the decomposing body. And they both are represented by the sun and the moon. Really, it's really awesome picture, because this is an eternal dance between the eternal and the temporal, and this dance, this coming to be and passing away, goes on forever and ever. It's really fantastic picture. Okay, so let's get back to the lots. When you talk again about the sun and the moon, there are also three layers connected with these two lights, because the syzygy is the prenatal conjunction of the sun and the moon, and that's the place where they are one, as it were. They are on each other, they are one, they're conjunct. And when you go one step downward, in the natal chart, you see that the sun and the moon are separated from one another. They can have any sort of configuration with each other, and this can be seen by their distance in portions. And they are, portions is actually the Greek translation of what we now call degree, a degree of etc. So portions is degree. The zodiac circle has 360 portions, degrees. Now on the lowest level, the sun and the moon are again together. They are joined, and as Schmidt said, their distance in portions is discounted. So they are one again, but now on a different level. They, in a sort of a way of the sort of an expression is they are now descended onto Earth. They are here in the world, and you can meet them by means of a lot of fortune and a lot of daimon spirits. Now, Valens said that these places, so fortune and spirit, should be studied religiously and not carelessly. Well, that is quite a statement to make. So that's important. That's very interesting stuff. And it's also important to know that they have their own timing device, which is called zodiacal releasing from fortune and spirit. I've studied zodiac releasing very intensely, and it's really a very important way of trying to get a hold of what is happening in someone's life and how one responds to it. And it has to do with action. It's really, really very important. So in one of my later videos, which I will publish on a YouTube channel, I will go into that material because it's really very important and very fascinating. So again, these lots are calculated with both the lot of fortune and a lot of the daimon. Now the principle, again, let me again show the principle. The moon is the mother, she's the goddess. And why is that important? Because where the sun's light gives birth to manifestation. That's actually how the moon is described in ancient texts. The moon reflects the light of the sun, so it has something to do with manifestation and coming to be because of the sun's light. Now in the chart, you could say that the moon is the mother as the physical body wherein you exist. And the body, don't forget, is also a place where things happen independently of your own actions and intentions. Again, we have the principle of fate, Tugé. And on the third level, you have mother as the matrix, wherein you and your chart and you as a person exist. So it's the world. You could say it's the cosmic body. That's very interesting. And that's the reason why fortune is called the archetypal lot. Because as I said in my first small remark is that this astrology has to do with the study of fate. So that's the reason why fortune is the archetypal lot. This is actually, you could say, sort of the goal of this astrology. And what people often forget is that the moon in this astrology also has a very material connotation. That's why I say the moon is singing, I am a material girl. Really because the moon also symbolizes the body in the ancient astrology. That's interesting. Okay, now let's have a look at the sun. So you could say that the principle of the sun is the father, that which creates. So what makes things come alive. I always use the image of dawn, the daybreak. What happens when the sun appears? Everything comes alive. You wake up in your bed and you go to work or you start doing things. The nature wakes up, the birds start to sing, etc., etc. So that's what the principle of the sun is. It's an impulse that makes something active. So in the chart, the father as a daimon is an impetus and an impulse to from inside of you to do something, stimulus. I want to do something. I'm going into action. And in the world, you have the lot of the daimon is the father as the impulse from outside, because not only from the inside are you inspired to do things, but there are also things in the world around you that is that can be an inspiration for you to act on things. So we have three principles of being activated, being in action. So, okay. So let me again explain something about the sun and the moon as the rulers of one's all. And this is the way in how Schmidt presented this. You can see that the moon is represented by the word synapses in the ancient texts. And that has to do with the word, the principle to take, to get it, also to conceive, becoming pregnant, receive something inside you, receptivity. That's what the moon represents. And the Greek word for the sun used in old Greek texts is katalepsis, which has to do with to grab or to seize upon something, to select it and hold it down. So the sun, as a lot of the daimon, has to do with undertaking things. You take it under you. And the moon, and that has to do with action. And the moon is the part of fortune, has to do with things that you undergo. So that's the principle of passion, action and passion, very loaded words in our language. So that's interesting. So Schmidt said, you could see the lot of fortune sort of as life as a corpus. Remember, the moon is a material girl. life as a corpus. So the lot of fortune represents life as a sentient being, things happening to your body. And when you think about a lot with the diamond, you could see life as an opus, something you make, something you do yourself, something that you undertake in your life. Your life as an undertaking. That's also a very loaded principle. So when you think of fortune, you can see that a lot of fortune has to do with the principle of how life makes and shapes you. And the sub-themes, as found in the ancient material, is that a lot of fortune has to do with disease and physical crises and material prosperity. So these are quite physical things happening to your life as if it was a body. Now, when you look at a lot of the daimon, is the principle of action, how you make your life, how you shape it yourself. So it has to do with actions, works, and career. And the sub-themes are very important, and I don't understand why this is never used in modern astrology, because the daimon is said to rule having to do with spirit, with soul and psyche, and also with God and religion and spirituality. Now, these are quite major themes, so it's a mystery to me why this is never used in modern astrology, which always focuses on the spirit, on the soul, on the psyche, on God and religion and spirituality. So they are missing something. And if you used a lot of the daimon, you can perhaps get a grasp on that, because it has to do with how you experience the world, and the world incites you to take action, or things you believe because of your experiences in the world. That's very important. Okay. I hope you're still with me. I'm now going to give you a key to the meaning of all these lots, but especially the Hermetic lots. Now, it's important to know that astrological calculations always have to do with operations on Moira, and Moira is one of the fate words. Moira is also the Greek word for what we call a degree. So the astrological portions are called Moira. So tinkering with these formula, is actually sort of operating on Moira. So that's interesting to know. But as you know, there are many, many lots. There are, you could always actually say there are a zillion lots, so it's quite a mess. And what to do with them, because you have certain lots that have a certain formula, as you see here, but sometimes the same formula is used for different lots. They have different meanings, they have different names. So that's important to try to understand. So what is the reasoning behind this? Why were they composed in this way, etc.? So I'm going to give you the key, and the key is this. You do this. You move the planet, and of course I have to say, not all sources neatly display the formula the way I've written here, the ascendant plus planet B minus planet C. But it's really helpful to do that, because that is what this trick is about. So what you do is you move planet C to the ascendant, and planet C moves along in the same distance. So the degree distance between planet C and B is, as it were, fixed. And then you move C to the ascendant, and B moves along at the same distance. And as soon as planet C arrives on a portion of the ascendant, planet B stops at the place where the set lot is in the chart. And that helps, because there is a trick to this, and I will show you. Now, first, let me say that why is the ascendant chosen? That's always, again, a loaded principle. It is the place where things first appear. And that is the sort of the magical clue, or the esoteric clue to why you can use this as a principle for getting to the concept behind the lots. So what is moved to the ascendant, C, is what the lot is about. And planet B, the one that defines the lot, is really what defines the planet that has now appeared on the ascendant for the first time, as it were. So if we look at the diamond lots, there are two of them, there's Eros and Victory. You could say, because the daimon is moved to the ascendant, and Venus is the planet that indicates where the lot is of Eros. That is what defines it. So by what is action defined? By Venus, by desire, by things that you want, by things that you desire, by things that you put your heart on. And that, of course, is the reason why the word Eros is used. It's not merely sexually, it's also everything that you can desire, everything you put your heart on. It's not merely physical. And when you look at victory, by what is action defined? In the lot of victory, it's defined by Jupiter. And Jupiter is also a principle of wanting to conquer something and to be victorious. So this is what it says. I hope you can read it. So the daimon is on the ascendant. Venus and Jupiter locate the lot and define actually what it's about. So it's about actions inspired by either Venus or Jupiter, the category of things that prompt or inspire you to take action. Because when we think of it, what are the main reasons why people come into action? They are these. What inspires and incites actions generally? Desire and hope. You want something, you yearn for something, Eros, and you hope that you will get it. Hope is also a very important factor in stimulating you to act on something. Okay, let's look at the fortune lots. The fortune lots, necessity, courage, and nemesis, are of a different order because here it's the planet that is on the ascendant. So that is what it's about. And then fortune, Tyche, defines what this lot is about. So why is the Mercury lot called necessity? Why is the Mars lot called courage? And why is the Saturn lot called nemesis? Well, first, I want to say that it's, of course, a very interesting principle to ask yourself when you have the planet Mars in your chart, which has to do with courage. Why would there be a need for a lot that is also called courage? If you have Mars in your natal chart, why would you have need for a lot that has to do with courage? Now, this again for me is confirmation of the fact that there is a third level at which these lots are functioning. Because again, why would you have need of a lot called courage when you have Mars in your chart, which is the principle of courage? So this has to do with, again, the third level. It has to do with something going on in the world, and I will show you how this works. So again, getting back to the clue, the key to their meaning. So when you look at necessity, the lot of Mercury, by what is Mercury defined? By fortune. So what you see is that fortune now defines Mercury stuff. So we are talking actually about a category of things that befall you, fortune, as a result of the planet's principal significations. Fate issues described by the planet principal significations. So that's an interesting thing because actually this is not about how Mercury is placed in your chart. It has to do with a separate category of trying to define things which happen in the world which have a mercurial nature. So it's not about you, it's about mercurial stuff happening to you. So it is about you, but you understand the difference, I hope, because the natal chart has to do about how you think and feel about things and how you go about things, etc. But when you define the principles of necessity or courage or nemesis or victory or Eros, you are talking about things separate from you in the outside world. That what has to do with the principle of these of these lots. So the planets here are used to define fated stuff as relatable to a planet. So fated stuff about mercurial principles, fated stuff about the principles of the planet Mars, and the fated stuff about the planet Saturn. Okay, so this is the principle behind it. This is the key to the meanings. You can use it for the other lots as well, but here I'm focusing on the other lots. Okay, let's have a look at them. I hope you can see everything. Now, here we have the Hermetic worldly experience. Why is that? Because fortune, Tughe, is actually sort of the general principle of everything that befalls you. So that's actually the meaning of fortune in Tughe. Everything that befalls you and how you generally deal with that. Deal with events, all the good things that are just happening and coming your way unintentionally. Remember that word, unintentionally. You're not seeking it, well, not in the fortune meaning, but it happens to you, and how you deal with things befalling you in general. Now, when we look at the necessity lot, you can describe it as restrictive and annoying situations as a result of mercurial things that force you to take action. It must be done. It got you into trouble, and now you are forced, ananke, to deal with it. It also has to do with enmity. A lot of people find this quite difficult to associate with the planet Mercury, but in Greek astrology, Mercury is also the planet of debate and of wrestling, gymnastic exercise and wrestling. And what you do in a wrestle match is you try to get the upper hand on an adversary and try to put him down and win him. How do you say it? You try to win, and that's exactly what happens in a debate. So something happening to you because of mercurial principles, in which you have a sort of a battle. Now, courage is also a very interesting one because it has to do with risky or dangerous situations that need you to respond in a way that you wouldn't normally do, as you can see in the description of the Liddell and Scott lexicon. It goes against your normal inclinations. So you're scared, or you get into a situation that you had not expected, and it is a bit threatening. How do you deal with that? That's what a lot of courage shows you in the chart. And a lot of nemesis has a lot to do with actually situations where you can no longer take any action or do anything about, a stalemate. And it has to do with impotence and exile and loss and grief, which are all things you can do nothing about. If somebody dies, the person is gone, and it brings a lot of grief, and it's a loss, and you can do nothing about it. So how do you deal with those situations? It's not only about death, but simply things in which you are no longer able to do something about. How do you deal with that? That's the question. It's interesting stuff. Now, also we have Hermetic action principles, which have to do with diamond spirits, which is the universal principle of going into action. So spirit is not something that happens to you, because that is a lot of fortune, but spirit has to do with action, taking things into your own hands. So you could say that diamond spirit has to do with situations that wake you up, situations in the outside world. Please remember that, because we are talking about the third level of the path downward. And so what wakes you up, what stimulates you to take action? And aspecting planets, is that what arouses the soul's action? Now, if you look at Eros, things, aspecting planets that arouse desire, that you long to do and that you put your heart on. The Greek word for that is epithumia. That's what stimulates you to take action. It's desire. I want that. That's what I want. That's the only thing that I want. And I'm going to put everything in action to get there, to get that. And victory is again situations, aspecting planets, in or on which you have placed hope and you are excited about. That's prothumia, is zeal and excitement, prothumia. Epithumia, the Eros desire word, is you put it on there. But prothumia means you put your heart before it. So you are excited about it and you would like to have it. That is what stimulates you to action. So you are hopeful about that principle, the aspecting planet or whatever you put your hope on, good and high expectations. Now, what is very important herein is that these significations can be attributed based on astrological principles, as I hopefully have explained to you in what I have presented up until now. Because Schmidt said Hellenistic astrology is a rational construct. And I hope you can see that these are actually significations that you can attribute based on the principle that I just shown you with the key to understanding lots and the upward and the downward path as a principle behind all this material. So let's have a look-see at the Hermetic lots again in a certain way. So there's also information in the old text about what they are said to do. And this is from Paul of Alexandria and Schmidt's translation of it. So Paul of Alexandria says, fortune signifies, and signifies means it points to something, and it becomes indicative of something. An indicator of what? Acquisition, reputation, and privilege. I think everybody knows these significations of the lot of fortune. Now, necessity has another is attributed with other things, namely that it makes and causes things, which is different from signifying something. So making and causing, necessity as a word, is itself an indication of forcible constraints, something confining, something you are subjected to. So makes and causes something. So what? It makes constraints and submissions, struggles. Think about wrestling, which is something that Mercury signifies in the ancient literature. Enmities, judgments, accusations, everything befalling men which are violent and compulsory in origin, which is a mercurial principle. Enmities, judgment, I think that's a strange person, so let's do things about it. Accusations, I don't like you, I think you're a loser. This mercurial principles. Now, courage is a contributing cause, and that means that it has a certain consequence, because when you do courageous things, it leads to boldness and perhaps even treachery, because treachery is a very dangerous thing to do to persons in power. So think of, no, I will not go there. Strength and might and every villainy, that's what it courage leads to. Nemesis is responsible for, which is also a different way of stating what Nemesis does, deific powers. There we have them, demons. And the revealing of all things hidden, we now would probably say the revealing of all things that are unconscious up until now, and of demonstration, impotence, exile, loss, and mourning. So this is what the ancient texts say about what these Hermetic lots indicate. Let's look at the diamond lots. You could call these perhaps the side effects of these planets, of these lots. Again, diamond is the principle of action. It happens to be Lord of Soul and every mental faculty. Again, the lot of the diamond is really a very important factor in psychological delineation of a chart, because when it rules every mental faculty, that's really everything, right? And it's the only lot that is said to be the master of something, the Lord of Soul. And the other lots, all of them signify things. So arrow signifies, and it points to things by deliberate choice. So you assent to the temptation. You want that. And it's your deliberate choice to go after them. So it becomes a contributing cause as well. So it has as a consequence, example, friendship and mutual favors. That's interesting. Nike, victory, also a contributing cause of what and leads to what? Trust and belief, good high expectations, and perhaps as well responsible for enterprise and success. I think that's quite clear, right? Okay. Now, I think what's most important about this is that actually we now have a new category of questions that we can answer for our clients. So to put it a bit in a funny way, what in the world made you do that? That's the question of the lot of the diamond, because what in general inspires or inspired you to do something, to take action? How do you normally go about that? What in the world made you do that? You're incited to do something, and the lot of the diamond has something to do with that. Now, Tuche, the lot of fortune, how do you generally deal with or manage life's events, life's vicissitudes. And how do you do that? Now, a lot of Mercury, was it something I said? You can inadvertently make someone feel bad or do something mercurial in which there is something of a debate going on and people get annoyed, and before you know it, you are in a conflict based on mercurial principles. Was it something I said? Now, Eris is the question, where have you put your heart on during your life? Can be answered by studying the lot of Eris. The Tolma lot, the part of courage, again, the question, how do you deal with difficult or threatening situations that need a response that you would normally never do or never choose or try to avoid? And now you can no longer. So how would you deal with that? And Nikkei, do you have in general a positive outlook on life? Because what inspires hope? And some people don't have hope because they have given up on whatever. And this can be perhaps studied by studying the lot of Jupiter victory. And Nemesis is, how do you generally deal with or manage disappointments, failures, or stalemates in your life? Okay, so I think this is a very interesting new way of approaching a chart, or perhaps approaching a delineation for someone based on these 7 Hermetic lots. Now, then comes the question, how do you cope with all this? And Schmidt said that the Lord, of course, is not the motive or the occasion for the lot's signification. You see that by the witnessing planets. The Lord has to do with how you take action, and he has to respond to these things. So how do you cope has to do with how do you manage these things. And in a sense, there are 7 ways to do this, 7 strategies, because each planet has its own specific way of dealing with things. Now, this is, again, a lot to take in, but this is based on the traditional Hellenistic or Greek way of describing the nature of the planet and how it operates and functions. So if we start with Saturn, Kronos, one of the words for Kronos is agnoia, which is the failure to take notice. So how do you manage the things indicated by a lot disposed by Saturn? You don't, because you don't see it. It's a failure to take notice. You're oblivious to it. You try to avoid it, or when you are aware of it, you try to ignore it or tough it out. So Saturn is quite austere and solitary. So I call this the Stoic approach. You try to raise above it, or discard it, or try not to be busy with it. You try not to interfere with it. Now, when you have Zeus or Jupiter as the planet ruling a certain lot, then it's the pompous or the philosophical or religious approach, because Zeus is always optimistic and attentive, perhaps indulgent or overly attentive. When you have Mars as the ruler of one of these lots, then you could say that you take the military approach, which is you take it head on or you flee, the tactical retreat, you might say. And Mars always also gets angry or is frustrated or goes at it with a vengeance, is hot-headed. And it's the quality, the virtue of Mars is removing obstacles. So that's a very interesting way of doing that. And of course, how effective this is always has to do with how Mars is placed in your chart. So you can go a bit further with this delineation, but this is the general approach that you normally take with these Hermetic lots. For Helios, when you have the Sun as the ruler of one of these lots, you have sort of a charismatic approach. You shine a light on it because the Sun that's what the Sun does. Catalepsis, it takes it under it and makes it the center of attention. Now, Venus and Aphrodite is the aesthetic or the pious approach. And Venus tries to develop rights for everything that it does. Mercury is very attentive. You could of course, call it the intellectual approach. And the moon is the very attentive approach. It's pays careful attention, but also worries about things, which is the thing that has to do with the way that Selene, the moon, goes about things. Care and concern, very caring and very concerned also about stuff. So that incites the care issue. Okay, I hope this helps to understand what's happening here. So I have some suggestions because this is the end of my webinar, the end of my talk on this. I have some questions for you that I will also, these ones, 1 to 6, perhaps interesting for you to do further research on these lots in your own chart. And it's interesting to do so. And I will address these questions myself in the videos that I will place on YouTube for you to check out. So these will be coming, and I hope you will look into them, because this is a very fascinating study, and I hope I have made some headway into this interesting material by means of explaining this, the upward and the downward path, and the key to trying to understand what the meaning is of these Hermetic lots. So it will be continued, and it will be continued in this series of videos on the concepts of the 7 Hermetic lots and an inquiry into their interpretations and delineations in natal charts. So this is the end of my talk. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I haven't put you asleep. So I hope you will join me in the further investigation of this fascinating topic of the Hermetic lots and the lots in general. So thank you for listening. And there is perhaps some time now for some questions.
Martien, if you would tell us what your YouTube channel is, please.
The YouTube channel is not yet aired as such, but it will be coming pretty soon. So I will notify you about it. So you can notify the persons who are now attending this webinar, and I will keep in touch with everyone trying to find these YouTube videos.
Martien, we'll also gladly, I'll also gladly share that with my audiences and point them to it once you get it up. So just let me know.
I will. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This was outstanding. Just the clearest, most lucid presentation on the lots that I've heard. And even in some ways, Robert, Bob Schmidt, his talks are so dense, 13, 14 hours sometimes these talks to go on, and you had a way today of distilling the essence of some of the things that he uncovered and packaging them with your own realizations and insights. Just really, really inspiring to see what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Martien, thank you. There are some questions already in the Q&A button that's down at the bottom. You'll be able to see the questions there. We do ask that you read them out, please, because so the question itself can be recorded in the recording. But before that, just briefly, you shared with me via email previously a resource where people can calculate their own lots. And I'd like to put that up on the screen briefly, if I may.
Yes, of course. Please do.
Okay. Okay. So this is a resource for all of you to be able to calculate the lots in your own charts. You can go to this website address, the software is not for Mac, and here are the instructions. As Martien said, you can take a screenshot of this later for your reference. And what you will see, can everybody see the web page up?
Yes.
Yes, okay. First thing you're going to do if you don't speak is this Dutch? Yeah, is go
It's
here,
like, yeah, yeah.
click English,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's Planet Dance Windows, click download Planet Dance, and then just follow the installation instructions. Martien, I was wondering if you are able, or Acyuta also, if we have time, please let me know. If you have the software, would you be able to give like a little demo of?
Yes, yes.
Is that all right, Acyuta? Do we have time for that?
We certainly do, and I think it would be great because everyone who watches this is going to email us otherwise asking how to do it. So
yeah, I'm getting ahead of my own workload right now.
Okay, so you're still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. Now I need to share, right? Share screen. Here it is. Okay. Does everybody see this chart?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Now, it's sort of a complicated program because it has a zillion possibilities. And the amazing thing is that it's free. And what's very good about this, that the person who's writing this software is a friend of mine. And whenever I ask him to do something, he just puts it in the software. So whatever you want in there, it can be done. So let me try to find my own chart.
Now, obviously, you have this in Dutch, but I'm assuming that in English, you just click on the same places.
Yes, you do that. I think this is file, and you can open it now. This is the startup chart of the moment that I opened this program. So when I right-click on it, I get this menu, and I go to classical, and you can see that there is a lot of information there, familiar to Acyuta, I think. When you are into traditional astrology, all the things here are put in there because I requested it or somebody else requested it. So when you look at Greek, the Greek, is one of the other persons who's operating or working on this software. Greek horoscope, you get this one. So I'll try to make it bigger. Can you see this? So again, this is a natal chart. So you see each planet is marked and you can see what dignities it is in because these very handy stripes are here. So you can see where everything is. And you can, let me take this, I cannot go down. You can, extra points will be in English. And here you see Hermetic Lots. And these have all of the different, let me show this one as well. The legend. The legend, is that an English word, legend? That's what the symbols signify in this chart. So
yeah, the key.
Yeah, thank you. The key, you see here, all the used symbols in this chart are the extra points, the Hermetic Lots, and I use the Schmidt variation. There will be coming a video in which I will explain the difference between how Hermetic Lots are usually calculated and why Schmidt changed for sometimes, in some cases, changed the way he calculated them. And that's quite important. So that is a topic in itself. So I will not go into that now, but this is where you find it. So let me do it smaller again. So what you do is you click on a chart, right click on a chart, you go to classical, you go to add Greek horoscope, and then you find this, and by the extra points, you can go to the Hermetic Lots. And there they are calculated for you, where you can find them. Yeah, is this clear enough?
Amazing, amazingly helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, the software is free, and really it has a zillion options, and it's quite sophisticated material. Really, really good. Really good. Okay. Okay. So, is there time for answering a question?
Yes, yes, you can take the questions from the Q&A box.
So Leila Atwell asked, so the environment one is in and what happens to a person is not fate? Well, I try to get the message across that it actually is fated, but it's also fated specifically for your own chart, because everything that I explained about the calculation of the lots is actually based on your own personal chart. So to say that is random is not exactly what the word coincidence actually means, because it's not random, it's actually sort of embedded in your chart. And that is put in a context, which is the context of the world that you live in. So it's your own personal space, I think. Okay? I hope this explains what I said. There are many books about how to do lot calculations, and I hope that the key that I presented will help you try to understand how you can use the lots for specific topics. So, okay. The chart example, I would do that in a later stage in one of the videos that will come up. I will, yeah, it's a very interesting way of a manner in which to show how lots are calculated, because it's actually quite simple. But I don't have time to go into that now, because I had several slides ready-made for that, but there's no time to present it here, but that will come also in one of the upcoming videos, I'm sorry to say. There's a lot of material, as you saw. It's a lot to do.
A lot to cover in just one talk.
Right, right. Yeah.
I think we'll have to have you come back and do a series, maybe.
Yes, please. I would like that very much.
I would ask that you read out the question that you're answering.
Sorry,
also.
sorry.
Thank you.
On the slide about coping, what does he mean by the Lord? Does he mean the Lord of the house where the lot is located? Well, actually, in the whole sign houses, the image, the sign where a lot is in, is actually also the house in which is in. So you could call it simply the ruler of the specific lot, the Lord of that lot. Okay. Thank you. Amazing lecture. Thank you. Thank you. I'm wondering about how the lots play out in synastry. Do you find them useful in that arena? I must say that I do not have a lot of experience of using these lots in what you say in synastry. So that's a field of this research that you can use for yourself. Please do, and let me know what your experience is with that. So, Bruno. Do you create a new map from the lot of fortune, making him the rising image, the ascendant? What guidance would you give to interpret these houses from the lot of fortune? Well, there is material in Vedia's Valence in which he says that the angles from the lot of fortune are very powerful, even more powerful than the regular rising image and the regular MC and the regular 7th place and the 4th place. So I do not create such a map, not from the lot of fortune. I have experimented with it, but I couldn't find anything that spoke to me in the sense that I could use it really actively. But I do use the angles from the lot of fortune, especially when you research why somebody made a big deal, made a big promotion or something like that. To get ahead in the world is often very much shown by these lots, these houses from fortune. And in the method of zodiacal releasing, it plays a major part. So that's a very interesting topic of study. Yeah. Another interesting question by Cassidy, Juniper Cassidy. I'm not sure The first name, yeah. Cassidy is your first name and Juniper is your last name. Nice name. How do you interpret the non-Hermetic Eros and necessity lots as different from the Hermetic ones? That's a very good question. And Schmidt did some research on that. I didn't include it in this presentation because it might be a bit confusing because it introduces another layer which has to do with what it means for a Hermetic principle to have to do with material things and having to do with action things. So the interesting thing is that these lots can, actually this is the lot of bases, as it was called in the ancient texts, but there are two of them. So I'm sorry I cannot be more explicit about it, but this is also a topic for another video, I think. So please stay in touch. Okay. Robert Walker, early in the talk, you spoke of retrograde planets, the Greek word, as having to do with a cross-examination, and also about the notion of retrograde planets being unreliable. Is it when a planet is in its shadow that it's unreliable, to be corrected by the retrograde phase? How do you think of these? To be perfectly honest, I do not use the antischia and the contra-antischia for evaluating how planets are functioning. So perhaps that is, how do you call it? It's not correct for me to not include them, but I have not found a place for them yet in these principles. So I'm sorry, I cannot really answer your question. Sorry. What about changing the formula for night charts? Asks Angeles Lopez. Again, this would be a very interesting topic and I will address it in one of the videos. But the problem is that the symbolism gets confused when you change the formula for night charts. So when you define the principle of action, as in the lot of the daimon, by taking the ascendant plus the sun minus the moon, and you reverse that by night, then you get lost in the symbolism because that symbolism doesn't reflect the meaning of the particular lot. So what happens is actually that in the night formula, you count in the other way, you count in the other direction. So in the day formula, I might be mistaken, but you count in zodiacal order, and in the night chart, you count country in contrast to the zodiacal order. But I'm not sure if I say that correctly, but I do not change the formula, but I only count them in the other way. Okay, is that clear? I hope.
Martien, I believe that Robert's question may have been misunderstood a little bit.
Okay.
When he said a Greek word, retrograde, the Greek word has having to do with a cross-examination, and also the notion of a retrograde planet being unreliable. Is it when a planet is in its shadow? And I think what he's saying is not so much the Antiscia concept, but the shadow period before a planet turns retrograde. The degrees that it covers by direct, that it will go back over in retrograde.
Okay.
He's asking, is it when a planet is in the shadow part of the retrograde cycle that it is unreliable to be corrected by the retrograde phase? How do you think of retrogrades?
No, thank you for explaining the question. In general, the Hellenistic astrologers simply said that whenever a planet is retrograde, and it doesn't matter if it's at the beginning of the phase or at the end of it, it's simply unreliable in the sense that it can be asked to give further evidence, witnessing. The planet in the judicial context has to do with witnessing. So then the witness is not completely has not been reliable, or perhaps has more to say about the topic. So that is the exact meaning of what retrogradation means. So it's, as far as I know, it's not dependent on the exact period of the phase it is in. So, okay,
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, do you look at lots? Robert Walker asks, do you look at lots in the fortune houses as well as the houses of the natal chart, and when do you do so? Robert Schmidt said that he looked at the lots as such in the natal houses, but for the outcome of lots, and these are not the Hermetic lots, but the lots in general, he looks at the fortune houses. I have not have much experience with that, but it's very important to note whenever one of these planets is in a fortune angle. So the first, 10th, 7th, or 4th from the lot of fortune, because then the impact will be much, much greater than in any other factor in the chart. Okay, is this okay? This is good, yeah? Okay, can we release from each of these specific lots? This has to do with Spencer Michaud asks this. I have not have much experience with zodiacal releasing from other lots than merely the lot of the fortune and the lot of the diamond, a lot of spirit. And I know that Schmidt said that it's not possible to do so. And he also said that he experimented with it and he did not find anything useful. And he said, well, when you use this method of zodiacal releasing, it has to make sense of the complete life of the native. So one of the difficult things in modern astrology is that we try to find hits. And trying to find hits is when you think, well, this person got a promotion at his job. Now we have to look at zodiacal releasing and try to find if one of these planets is in a fortune angle or not. And when it's not, the method of zodiacal releasing does not explain why this person got a promotion. But that is a bad habit having to do with the overuse of transits in modern astrology. Whenever you try to locate something, you try to find a hit. And the interesting thing about zodiacal releasing is that it's sort of a storybook of your life. So using this method has to make sense of your life on the whole. So when you find a hit with, for example, a lot of errors is often used for that. When you find a hit and you found the person you love because one of these zodiacal releasing things showed that it was a hit, well, it does not, when it does not produce the same results in later years, then the question is, Schmidt said, then you get a red herring. You find something and you think it is meaningful, but it is not. So I have not ever tried zodiacal releasing for the other Hermetic lots, and only do it for the lot of spirit and the lot of fortune. Okay.
Martien, we are running a little bit, not short on time, but we have, I think, time for one or two more questions.
Okay.
I'm looking at the questions list, and I think Laura asked a really good one. It's at the very bottom.
Okay. Laura. Oh, so Laura asks, when do you use lots when reading for a client? Would you bring the lots into a first-time natal chart reading for a client? Or should it be saved for a repeat customer? Maybe for someone wanting only specific info? A very good question indeed. You can use I use the lots as a background information about how persons tend to react to situations which happen to them. So in one of my slides, I said, there is a new category of questions that you can answer with these lots, which have to do with how do you cope with a situation which is actually quite devastating because there seems to be no way of dealing with it. That's the lot of Nemesis, the lot having to do with Saturn things in your life. So I would say I would use that to try to understand what is happening to you now, because a client almost always comes to me when their life has run amok. So that's always a principle for, well, what happens to you is that a person reacts from a certain way, which is very ingrained in them because of their life experience. So the lot of nemesis has a lot to do with, well, I don't know how to react to this situation, which is a principle of Saturn. I don't know how to go further with this. And a lot of nemesis can be used to try to discern how a client is usually programmed to deal with such things. So then I use the lot of nemesis to get a vision for this person. Well, this is how you were taught in your life by experiences, by people telling you how to deal with this, and how you can perhaps use another way of reacting to this, because it's ingrained, it's almost in your body, as it were. This is so, yeah, so specific and so deeply ingrained. It's almost, when you try to change that, it's almost like it's genetical manipulation. Is that the right English word? You try to change something that is so deep within you that it's almost impossible to think about this situation in another way. And that's how I use these lots in any situation, in any consultation that can be used as such.
Maybe we'll just take the last question from Michelle,
Okay.
and then we'll pass it on to Acyuta.
In your experience, besides Fortune and Diamond, do some of the 7 Hermetic lots pop up more than others? Are some of the lots more notable in the charts than the rest? In a general sense, I would say, I think that a lot of Eros, the Venus lot, because that has to do with what you desire, it's a very strong motivator, as is the lot of Jupiter, which has to do with hope. So these two are the things that are, because we live in our modern times now, which is very individual and very individualistic, I think that these are the lots that we use all the time, and we are also used to using as a motivation for ourselves to do things. Oh, I want that. Oh, I think this is going to be a great idea. So that's how we deal with them. So that's it. Thank you for all the questions.
Martien, this talk has been absolutely amazing, and I will be rewatching it many, many, many times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. And we, by the way, in addition to Martien having a YouTube channel coming out, he also, we very much hope will have more talks with us coming out. So definitely would like to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me just bring back up on the screen our speaker series so that you can all see it. So this was today's talk with Martien Hermes. What a fantastic talk. Don't forget, everybody, that next Saturday at 12, Stormy Grace will be here. She's a PhD in business. She's going to talk about astrologers who are thinking about trying to create a social media game. I'd probably say, half of the students that go through my program end up asking questions about how to create a presence online, or, especially, for example, Martien has really great content that everybody loves. YouTube is a natural place to put it. He's going to go through a process of putting his stuff up. Martien, you'd probably love this talk with Stormy. She'd probably give you some good advice.
Yeah.
Probably give me too, because I had to figure it out by myself when I put mine up. And whether it's that or anything else about marketing yourself, this next talk should be really helpful. Now, you can sign up for that on the website, nightlightastrology.com, under the events page, register. And if you can't make it next week, you get a replay link for a week. So yeah, remember that these talks are free and completely open to the public, thanks to the fundraising that we do at the end of the year. I have my Kickstarter coming up from the end of November through December. We'll raise money again, and you'll be supporting, if you pitch into that, you'll be supporting paying speakers like Martien next year. We don't take any profit from these events. And I promise you, we pay our speakers 2 to 3 times more than just about any conference pays speakers. And we do that specifically because it's a karma yoga for us to give back to other teachers, and especially people who come in and really make my programs a lot better, because it allows students to hear someone other than me droning on. So that's very nice. And last but not least, Martien, could you say one more time how people can get in touch with you if they want to, your website?
Yeah, I have an email address. I think is the most direct way. Is info@Martien Hermes. I have to think about it all. I wait. Yeah, info@martienhermes.com. That's the one. So it's info@ and Martien Hermes is my name.com. So if you mail me, I will put you on a list and I will inform you about everything that I will be presenting.
Great. And yeah, we would love what you were talking earlier about the Thema Mundi and other things that you can give talks on. And so we would love to get you back out in some of the future series to give some of those talks as well.
Thank you very much. That's a
yeah,
great compliment. Thank you.
you bet. Yeah. Well, all of you guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's talk. And if you want to be in touch with more talks, you can also sign up for our newsletter on our website, nightlightastrology.com. You'll get all the updates about new speaker series coming out. We have a winter speaker series that's coming forth as well. And Patrick Watson looks like he's going to be a part of that one. I think Cassandra, I'm forgetting her last name, Tyndall, I want to say. So, and a couple more talks on Hellenistic astrology coming up, in the winter, and then we'll be booking into the spring and so forth. So you can always usually find out what we're going to do about a season in advance. So the new series will come out probably in the next month. All right. So everyone have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thanks, Martien. Thanks, Delia.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.